The signal sequence, you already know that it is something which guides this polypeptide to whether to retain inside the cell or outside the cell. Okay. And what are these intines and extines? Intines are comparable to introns, which does not code a protein. Thus, like intron, these needs to be removed later on. Similar way, extines are comparable to exons, which codes for a protein. In exons, right? But extines are the functional or the important parts of the polypeptide. Now, you see, this nascent polypeptide is not functional in the beginning, right? So it has to go certain modifications, and that modification will finally convert it into its biologically native functional form. Okay, just to give a very a light overview. Okay, if this is the polypeptide, ultimately what happens, this nascent polypeptide has to either convert into secondary structure, tertiary structure, or some may convert into quaternary structure. Okay, and most of the proteins obtain tertiary structure, because tertiary structure is the three-dimensional structure of the protein which is functional. All right, and okay, so what are the forces, what are the modifications which convert this polypeptide into this functional protein? Okay, that is what we need to know. This is now these sort of modifications occur after translation. That's why we are calling it post translational modification, and these are really important. Okay, so let us just try to see what are the things, what are the factors which helps this polypeptide to govern its functional structure. The very first we have to understand is that the factor like chaperones. Chaperones are, we know, are the heat shock proteins, okay, or stress proteins. These proteins generally are produced during stresses, and that's how they came to know, the scientists came to know about chaperones. And the function of these chaperones, you can see this star like structure. This basically helps this polypeptide to fold properly, and not only that, but it also prevents this nascent polypeptide from certain protein particles which are already present in the cytosol and could attach to this polypeptide and deform it, right? So chaperones helps in post-translational modification, but remember, these are not post-translational modification. These are the factors which help. Non-covalent interactions. Non-covalent interactions are hydrogen bonding, okay, and van der Waals force of interactions, and these ionic forces of attraction. So there are so many, right? And these forces of attractions are very crucial in helping these polypeptides to attain a proper folding, right? And that folding actually is the result of these interactions because of the amino acid residues present in the polypeptide. Okay, and we know that these amino acids have certain charges like positive charge, negative charge. Some of the amino acids are polar, some are non-polar, right? That means some are hydrophilic, some are non-hydrophilic, and so much. So all these factors which are these non-covalent interactions, and also covalent interactions like disulfide, and you know, some of the amino acids have sulfur groups, right? And these tend to form a disulfide linkage and thus help in folding of the protein. So basically, in post-translational modification, we are trying to see how the polypeptide, the nascent polypeptide, properly folds in order to obtain its maximum potentiality. Okay, and okay, now these factors help this polypeptide to obtain certain structures as per required by the cell. Now, and what are the types of modifications? Certain types of modifications that could go on to this polypeptide. Okay, the one is N-terminal and C-terminal modification, that is this amino terminal and carboxy terminal modifications tend to happen in almost all the proteins, I mean all the nascent polypeptide. Okay, and along with that, methionine signal sequences, they need to be removed, okay, because their part was in methionine part was to initiate the translation in order to grow long polypeptide, because without its addition nothing could have happened. In a similar way, signal sequences were the sequences of amino acid which guided this polypeptide to go to certain destination. Therefore, these are not required, okay, and so these are removed, all right, and these are modified. Okay, so what do we have left? We have now left the polypeptides. Now obviously we have removed the intines, right, and all these red extines are all ligated, are all joined together, so you are not finding any of the intines over here. Okay, now like I said, removal of intine proteolytic degradation has removed all of it. And also I would like to add something, is that when we say proteolytic degradation, degradation occurs by the help of peptidase enzyme, okay, and this peptidase enzyme based on where they act, okay, they can be classified as endopeptidase and exopeptidase. So basically the intines which are towards the terminals, okay, those are removed, okay, like if say this is at the terminal, this one is at the terminal, so these are removed by peptidase, and those peptidases are called exopeptidase, okay, like I defined them earlier. And those peptidases which remove the intines which are present inwards or inside are called endopeptidase. Okay, now covalent modification in individual amino acids. See, what you have to remember is that these types of modifications which I am explaining are the types of modification that could occur. It's not compulsory that all these modifications has to happen in every protein. No, it's not going to happen like that. It's per desire, per need of that protein. Okay, now to explain that well, for example, let's say histones. We know what histones are, right? Histones are the specific proteins which binds to DNA. It in fact helps the DNA to wrap in coil so that the long chains of these nucleotide sequences could be compact so well inside the nucleus, right? And these histones, you see, have tails, okay, they have tails, and these tails are mostly enriched with arginine and lysine. These are the basic amino acids, okay. So the tails of these histones are enriched with this amino or these basic amino acid residues. So what happens is that these histones are mostly getting either phosphorylated or methylated or even acetylated, okay, acetylated. So you can see that acetylation, methylation or phosphorylation of arginine and lysine of the tails of histone is also one type of modification, because these modifications can actually change the structure of histone. And by that what I mean is that because of this modification, the DNA wrapped in the histone could either be very compact or very loose, okay. So you can see the structure was changed, okay. And in a similar way, we have so many of enzymes in our body, right, regulating or let's say in participating in so much of enzymes reactions like glycolytic or in the Krebs cycles or in the urea cycle. There are so many of the enzymes, and you see most of the enzymes or in the glycogen degradation or synthesis, right, there are so many of enzymes. So these enzymes needs to be regulated, right. And again here, if we say these are the enzymes, okay, then certain enzymes could be activated, okay, on phosphorylation, okay. So if let's say the phosphate group attaches to the hydroxyl portion of serine, threonine or tyrosine of this protein, let's say this protein being an enzyme for now, then this will activate it, okay, by the protein kinases. All right, so this is activating it. So once phosphate is added, now there is a conformational change in this enzyme, and in such a way that this enzyme becomes either activated or sometimes on dephosphorylation, okay, on dephosphorylation this could be either activated or deactivated. So here again, always remember structure defines its function. For example, if this is a protein, let's say, my hand is a protein, let's say, so it is designed in such a way that I can grab this pen. Okay, so the structure defines the function. If this should if I keep my dorsal side and if I put my pen here, I can't grab it because this has not been designed in that way. In a similar way, the proteins are also designed, and that design or that folding of the protein is basically because of these factors which brings in modification of these proteins. Okay, and now let's talk about so in that way the enzyme could regulate the whole cycle. Okay, and that basically is by converting or arranging the folding of this peptide. Now there are certain proteins which are present in the synovial fluid or the mucous lining, right, and those proteins are glycolated. Okay, I mean mostly if you I think you've heard of proteoglycans or mucopolysaccharides, right. These are present in mucous lining or mucous particles, right, which are slightly oily or lubricating. Okay, so what happens is that the carbohydrate moiety, okay, the oligosaccharide moiety can attach to this hydroxyl portion by O linkage or to this asparagine by N linkage. And now you can imagine if this is, let's say, hyaluronic acid of the synovial fluid, how that hyaluronic acid is formed by addition of the oligosaccharide to this protein. Now this proteoglycan is now hyaluronic acid or mucopolysaccharide, right. So the structure of this protein is ultimately converting into tertiary or quaternary based on the factors that are modifying it. Okay, this is called chemical modification. Okay, and these are just the examples. Okay, and similarly some of the cysteine which are sulfur containing amino acid could form intralinkage, okay, which tend to happen in proinsulin, right. So in the proinsulin, the cysteine forms these intralinkages, and which later on needs to undergo proteolytic degradation to produce insulin, right, which is the active form. Okay, so again I am telling you these are the examples of proteins, and what you have to understand is that with all this sort of modification, the protein is folding and trying to attain its biological form or active form. Okay, now similarly collagen is the structural part of our muscle, right, and the hydroxylation of proline and lysine actually activates the collagen. So again the modification, the collagen won't be active unless these are hydroxylated. And similarly, okay, so these were basically the covalent modification of individual amino acids. Now comes the prosthetic groups. So even by the addition of the prosthetic groups like biotin and heme to the protein could render this protein to become active. For example, acetyl CoA carboxylase. Okay, so this is an enzyme which adds carbon dioxide to acetyl CoA. All right. So in order for this acetyl CoA carboxylase to be active, this has to have one component which is biotin. Okay, so this vitamin attached to this enzyme and carrying this carbon dioxide causes a reaction to happen. So basically those parts which are not enzyme, or we can say prosthetic, can actually help these enzymes or these proteins to obtain the particular structure which is biological form. And similarly heme is the another prosthetic group which could help form hemoglobin cytochrome. So basically in here post translational modification, what we've learned is that the nascent polypeptide has to ultimately convert into its active form, which is either tertiary or quaternary or secondary, depending upon the need of the cell, and this can be attained by various factors like these chaperones, non-covalent interactions and covalent interactions, but these are just guiding. The main key players are these modifications which I mentioned earlier, which helps this protein to obtain the functional biological functional form. Okay, so class, this is the post translational modification, and in the next video I'll be presenting in another topic.